Um, Doug, welcome to Coffee with a Purpose. I know this is not your first time here. I know that. I can't remember the last time you spoke to us, but we're certainly interested in hearing updates on everything that your committee and volunteer group is involved with. And I apologize to the group, by the way. Josh was quick to point out to me that I had misidentified who Doug was associated with. Somehow I had you as Friends of Natick Trails. I know you hate that group, so we didn't want to call you a friend of Doug at all. But
Well, but all of us coordinate pretty well, I think, and Doug can add to that. But when we're doing something like what is it called, Earth Day all around Natick, we the three groups, Open Space and Doug's group, and all coordinated on different things, and I think we got along pretty well.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, Doug, that you know most of the people here, but just on the off chance you don't, we'll go around and do intros. Although if you know that Doug already knows you, you can limit the bio material. Martin, you know Doug, right?
Yeah, I'll limit the bios, yes.
Yeah. Right. And I moderate this group and do most of my volunteer work with First Congregational Church and Sarah.
And I know Doug because
You're
he's doing what I was doing before, except he has more help and it's going great. So hooray.
And Bill. And
yeah, you know me. I'm now the renegade of Pagan Cove. After going against all advice and doing what needed to be done. So you know me.
and Brian. Brian's licking an envelope. I gotta come off mute. Yeah. You're on mute, Brian.
On Monday morning.
Right.
I've met you a couple times and live on Oak Knoll. Just did the Cochituate Trail yesterday, or the aqueduct, and nice first time. Nice
Great.
spot. Interesting.
Carol.
Yeah, good morning, Doug. Carol Berkowitz. So I live on Lake Cochituate and have been concerned about the lake for a long time and worked with the DCR for a long time and also the Natick Conservation Commission. I'm now a town meeting member, and at 86, I'm not out on the trails so much anymore, but I'm lucky to live on the lake and have a beautiful view and try to take care of it as much as possible. Nice to meet you.
Thanks,
You
Carol. Too. And Ricky, of course,
Well, my bona fides with respect to Lake Cochituate date back to the creation of the Lake Cochituate Watershed Association in 1976. And we've been trying, well, I know in the beginning it was the league and surrounding towns that created the Watershed Association. And for years there was attention paid, and it's obviously an ongoing project that succeeding generations have had to pick up. Since that time, I've been a town meeting member, selectman, housing authority member, and now expatriate, sadly, but I'm still here with you.
And we're happy to have you
now.
Yeah. Thanks, Ricky. Carrie.
Morning, Doug. Let's see. Yeah, we've met a couple of times. Town meeting member, treasurer for Pets Keep Natick Beautiful, was a co-founder of Renewable Natick that drafted the resolution that town meeting passed back in 2018, kind of paving the way to get to net zero emissions here. And just want to say happy referral day to everybody. And I'm probably going to go incognito here as I can organize a few things in my office, but we'll be listening attentively.
Great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. And Elaine?
Elaine Ostroff. In Natick, I'm officially Josh's mother, relatively new to town. I cooked dinner for Eleanor Roosevelt when I was an undergraduate. So glad to be here.
It's quite a claim to fame. Cindy?
Cindy Bates, trail steward, Jack Bay Trail. occasional picker-upper at Coolidge Field for Keep Natick Beautiful, and most recently helping with the CPA for Natick. Yay!
Yeah.
And
Excited.
moved here in 2019, so 3 years.
Great. Sally?
Hi, Doug. Nice to see you again. I'm still Sally and still Pat's sister and still very fond of this group. I think this is a marvelous, wonderful to see you again. I loved your last presentation and your last discussion with us. And I particularly like your background this morning. It's very, very elegant.
Hmm. Thanks, Sally. Pat?
Hi, Doug. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's great to see you, and glad we're having this chance to talk with you, Doug. And yeah, you know me well.
Yeah.
Know you well.
Peter.
Sure.
Hi, Peter. And Brinley.
Good morning. Please forgive me for not being on camera today. I am working off of my phone in my pocket. I'm a resident of Natick for 22 years, I guess. I'm a town meeting member. I'm excited to hear your talk today and glad for all that you do. Thanks.
Thanks, Brinley. And Rick.
Hey, good morning. Nice. I've been looking forward to hearing you, Doug. I've been living here about 5 years, really enjoying all the trails, and the improvements that I've seen are marvelous. And
All right.
welcome.
Cool. I think I got everybody. So we'll turn it over to you, Doug. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks everybody for having me. It's been probably, I don't know, I gotta think it's a year maybe since I last came on and talked, and it's always nice to be in a friendly group with like-minded people for sure. And my goal today is for those, I think most of you know sort of how the group formed and all that. I'll just do a quick 2-minute overview of like how long we've been in existence, what our goals are for this year, and then talk specifically about or more in depth about some of the opportunities that we've got ahead of us, and curious your input as well as to those opportunities and where we want to focus and prioritize as we go into 2023. I even have a couple screen shares to brighten this up a little bit, so we'll get to that in a second. So first off, as a sort of high-level overview, September 2021, the group was formed, the Trails and Forest Stewardship Committee. This had been a long time coming. We had been talking about this for years, and before that I was on with Martin on the Open Space Advisory Committee, still am on that committee. And we had talked about sort of the need for a trails dedicated group to look and maintain the trails, because what was happening was there were some defunct groups, there were some other groups like Pat's group, and there wasn't clear roles and responsibilities. And so over time, it got to the point where we were able to form this committee. I was very passionate about that committee and was happy to join the committee and then serve now as the chair of the committee since 2021. And I feel like it's been an improvement. Now, maybe that's selfish for me to say that, but I feel like at a minimum, people know where to go when there's trail issues, requests, that kind of thing. We also work very closely with the town and Claire Rondelli to make sure that we're in coordination with them, the DPW, and coordinating all of those groups, I think, is one of the benefits of my committee, is that now there's clearly someone that is responsible for that. So that's it at a high level. So the things that we're focused on though, and these will evolve over time, but one of the first things was trail signage. So if you don't know, prior to 2021, the trails were, I would say, haphazardly blazed. And it's funny, I live close to the high school and I would walk down to Timothy Coolidge Woods with my kids, and I would get lost like frequently in the woods there. And it really isn't that big of a space, and it seemed odd. And I feel like I'm fairly good with sort of general navigation. it seemed odd to me that like we're sending people out on these trails and they don't even know they're going to get lost when they go out there and likely not return because they can't figure out where they are. So one of the main first objectives of the group was to resolve that. And so what you'll see now on the trails that we support, and that's pretty much every town trail. So you know, the ones that you'll see maps for on the town website. Some of the smaller side trails we don't manage, but the larger ones we certainly do, was to get out there and make sure that people A, knew where they were, and then B, once they're on the trail, knew how to navigate it. And so we spent a lot of time out there. You'll see blazes on every trail at this point. We're in the process of refurbishing the kiosks. So the kiosks used to have very old and dated maps. So we've been replacing maps in the kiosks. We're trying to go away from the paper maps, like sort of stocking paper maps, just from a environmental perspective. And a lot of people, frankly, will take a picture of the map on their phone and use that as they walk around the woods. And that's probably the best scenario for us. But we've made significant progress, I would say, on improving the trail signage. The kiosks are probably one of the things that in 2022 we didn't get to, that I regret and probably will be a very high priority in 2023. And that's just the look and feel of the kiosks. Those have been around for probably, Martin would know better, but 10 to 15 years I'm going to throw out. Some of them are in a little bit worse shape. Some of the plexiglass on there has frosted over, so it's difficult to see underneath it. And so, you know, we want to stain those. We want to replace the plexiglass and get a consistent look and feel underneath that glass so that each trail is consistent across Natick. So that will certainly be a high focus for us. In the near future, we'll also be putting up some junction numbers in places like Town Forest. So junction numbers are used at the trustees in certain places that are probably bigger than others to locate yourself. So on a map, you'd be able to see, you know, you'd see a tree with the number 10 on it, and you'd be able to go to your map and identify where you are on the trail. So that's another thing. Town Forest is one of the areas that gets a lot of usage, and it can be very confusing back there. I can get spun around back there very easily myself, and I'm sure others as well. So some additional improvements will still be happening between now and next summer that I think are relevant. And then we just got updated maps. So we work with the town and we are in the process of approving those new maps. Once we get those approved, it will put into place some of the changes that we've made and update just sort of the topography on those maps. We'll get those posted out to the town website, and then we'll also make sure that those are the maps that we're using in the kiosks. So that's kind of the first step in the group. The second one was the Trail Steward program. So it was very clear to me that we needed to have not only someone to fix up the trails, but to keep on them and to keep, Pat knows this well. Unfortunately, people are littering on the trails, and and this, I'm stealing this from Pat, but I wholeheartedly agree with it. When people see trash laying on the trails, I think there's a higher likelihood that they themselves are likely to trash there or not care about it. And when there's not, people are more reluctant to do that. Now, I have no study that shows that, but I can tell you this, I feel like the trails are cleaner than when we started. And I think the reason for that is we have a trail steward program. There's 3 stewards for every trail we have in Natick. We ask those stewards to go out at least twice a month to go out and pick up and then report back on our website the number of hours that they're spending. Those hours are important because Claire can then use those for grant purposes. And we can also use that to show the value that the Trail Steward program's bringing. So that steward program is about to go under a little bit of a shift. I'm going to move the responsibility from me overseeing that to one of our stewards. Her name's Mary Hudson. She'll be taking that over. I'll be announcing that to the stewards here in the next couple weeks. And the reason for doing that is just to frankly diversify. I feel like I had too much going on to keep as good of a watch on it as it was deserved. And so I think Mary will be able to do that much better, and then obviously report back to us. I keep in close contact with Mary. She's a steward on the Henry Wilson Trail today. And so I think Mary will be able to give it a little bit more thought and time than I was able to do myself. So that'll be the big change there. But we plan to continue that steward program, and then continually circulate new people into there as people choose not to participate anymore or move away or anything like that. The other piece of this is coordinating large events for the trails, so community events. Historically, we've done 2 large community events called Natick Trails Day, one in the spring, one in the fall. Our spring day this year coordinated with Bill and the Eco Natick group that was doing the Earth Day. And so as part of that, we had 2 different groups out there cleaning up the trails. And it was a nice sort of coordination with that event and our group. And then we just did our Fall Trails Day probably 2 months ago in October. And those are always good days to sort of get out and meet people, do hands-on work. And we've been spending, and I'll speak a little bit more about this, but we've been spending a lot of time on the town forest, specifically on that meadow area. And I'll go into that a little bit deeper. But I love doing the community events because, you know, sometimes sitting behind Zoom, you know, you need to get out and actually get your hands dirty and meet people face to face. And I think those are the best opportunities to do that. We have, luckily, my vice chair of the committee, Lisa Stanley, is a botanist. And so she is very well equipped to handle invasive species. And that's been certainly a focus of ours. If you don't know, a lot of the trail system is overrun with invasive species. And knocking those back, keeping them in check is a high priority. That's sort of there's trails and forest stewardship. That's sort of the forest stewardship part of the committee. And so we've been putting together an invasive species plan. We're focused, again, mainly on town forest right now, just because of the size of it and how many invasive species there are out there. I'll talk a little bit about more of that when I talk about the town forest work that we're doing. We also, a few weeks ago actually now, did a trails building training session. So one of our goals for this year was, we have all these people that are doing trail work, but we've never formally been trained on how are you supposed to do this work? And so we coordinated with the Mass Audubon, and the Concom was generously paid for the training from Mass Audubon. We had a 2-3 hour virtual session, and then the following day we went out to Morse Pond Trail over by Lilja to practice what we had learned, and did significant work. I mean, probably 3-4 hours worth of what they call bench cutting to make that trail a little bit nicer. So I think it's been a nice coordination to educate us as well. Just because we're on the Trails and Forest Stewardship Committee doesn't necessarily mean we have any deep knowledge of how to build trails and how to maintain trails. I think we've got a better sense for that after that training. And then the other thing is community promotion. So for years, Martin and I and a few other volunteers have sat out at Natick Days and Earth Day and all kinds of Natick events. And we'll sit there with our map and we will talk to people that come by. And I think one of the things that always dawns on anyone who works in those efforts is the amount of new people coming to Natick, and they have very little knowledge of the trails that are around them, even in their neighborhoods. And on one of the exercises we do is we'll have them show us where they live on the big map, and then they will be able to quickly see that, oh my God, they're 2 blocks away, I could get access to Pickerel Pond or wherever it is. And I think that's an important piece of this, is to make sure that people appreciate the natural spaces and open space that they have around them. And obviously, we hope that that will encourage them to be a future trail steward or pick up the trail when they're out there, or to get out in nature a little bit more often. I think COVID, if there was a silver lining to COVID, it was that it got people out on the trails. We've seen a significant increase in the number of people utilizing the trails, caring about the trails, wanting to know more about the trails. And I think that's certainly been a silver lining to the whole COVID, pandemic. And then lastly, the meadow restoration project. So I'm going to show you a picture here. Let me share my screen. I think I'm going to share my screen here. Let me see. There we go. Okay. Can you guys see this? Is that visible?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. So actually, why don't you go one more back? Sorry. Jim Franzreb is a person on our committee. Him and Lisa Stanley are really the overseers of this meadow restoration project. Both of them know way more about plants, native plants, invasive species than I'll ever know in my life. And they have been dedicating a lot of time to restoring the meadow in town forest. This is an overhead shot, as you can see here, in 1952, or from 1952, of the town forest meadow. As I understand it, and I wasn't around at this time, I heard that they even had soccer fields or some sort of recreational fields out there. And in that path, you could even drive back on that path from Oak Street back there. I'm sure people on this committee know more about that than I do. This is that same stretch in 2015. And the Conservation Committee, and I'm not sure, it was after this, with help from an Eagle Scout project, decided to clear this meadow and try to restore that meadow. And that was what sort of started this restoration of that meadow. So that's it in 2015. They came in with heavy duty machinery, cut all that down, chipped all the wood up, and left it there for us to then take from there. And this is a picture of that from January of this year. So I think we've made some significant progress with this restoration. Lastly, I'll show you, this is from Jim. This is his game plan for the meadow. And so as you can see, there are a lot of things that are happening. The green is what we've been focused on mainly. The yellow are things that we have started but have not completed. And there's some areas that we have not started yet. And I think the thing that I've learned through this is that this is a process. This is not something you just do on a trails weekend and you're done and you move on to the next thing. This is something that it's going to take years and years and years. That said, I think we've got the focus to do that. We've actually, Jim's just requested some volunteers to go out there periodically to continue to clear invasives, to help with that. It's heavy duty work. We had a trails day there. We've had trails days there, honestly, every year for the past 3 years at least. And it's heavy duty work. What we found was the chipping of the trees was not necessarily a good thing. because what happened was the layer of that, nothing can get through it other than the invasives. And so so now, unfortunately, we have the heavy duty job of clearing out where those wood chips are really bad and are super thick in order to allow natural plant life to come up. So that's what makes it sort of back-breaking work. And so there's a lot of shoveling, raking, wheelbarrows, trying to move that. So you can see there on the top, it's wood chips removed. We're doing some overseeding on this. So you know, like I said, this is a work in progress, but certainly something that we think is important. And every time I go back out there and see the progress, I'm very happy to see how it's progressed. So I'll pause there. I know I said a lot. Just, do you have any questions or comments about anything that I've mentioned so far?
Cindy, I think, got her hand up first, and then Sarah.
So 2 questions. One is, what's the sort of end goal vision? And the other question is, do you know the history of how that field came to be in the forest?
I'll answer your first or your second question first. I do not know the history, and that's why I sit around Pat and Martin and these guys, because they know the history of all this stuff. So I'm like a sponge with these guys. So maybe they can add into the history behind that. I think the end goal is sort of continue the focus on restoring that meadow, and specifically the invasive species. I think that's the thing that is really taken over town forest. The town has put significant amount of money, and they had a vendor come in, and still we're working with that vendor to remove invasive species. Earlier, or probably not even earlier, it was probably 2 months ago, we had an Eagle Scout project that went out there, and Lisa Stanley and them went out, identified Aurelia bush, and then the Eagle Scout team came in and removed all of those bushes. So it's a slow progress, and but it's rewarding work, because over time, like anyone who's seen that before they went and did that sort of the clear cutting to now, I think it's a significant, it's noticeable, you know. And when you go out and there's wildflowers out in that meadow, it's really encouraging to see all of that. So I don't know if there is an end date. You know, I think maybe the amount of time we spend on it decreases over time, but I think it'll need care and attention as we go forward.
No, I didn't mean an end date. I meant like, what? So the idea is to have a wild meadow. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly right. Right.
Yeah,
that's the end goal. Yeah, Brindley. Oh, I'm sorry, Doug.
I just tried. Sarah had her hand up, but yeah, we kind of go in the order of say Brindley after that.
So I was there Doug and I were there at that trails day this fall, pulling up buckthorn, and yeah, the meadow looks really different, and so it's great. And I know I've said this before, Doug, but I just continue to, having struggled with a committee that was too small to get much work done. I really applaud your reconfigured committee and your efforts, and you know, Pat and I were sort of the 2 last people standing on the old committee, and it's just more than we could muster to get stuff done. So we tried, but it just, anyway, I really appreciate your work. But the question I have is, if you go further into the forest after the meadow, there's a place where there's been a tremendous amount of erosion. That you know, there's a for the people who have not seen this, there's a, you know, I used to refer to it as the town forest canyon. There's an eroded feature that I could stand in with my head at ground level. And
the Great Gash.
The Great Gash, there you go. In fact, I was there on Earth Day. I did a couple of geology hikes, and that was my go-to place to show the some of the particular kind of glacial deposit that's out there, because I knew I wouldn't have to dig hard to get to it. And I was just wondering if there's any update on whether the town is going to get involved in trying to address that at all.
Yeah, so I work with Claire and she would probably have a better update on that. From our committee standpoint, we sort of defer on that specific topic. Look at that as a town issue.
Yeah, I mean, we did too. It was more than we could take on, but I was just
Yeah.
wondering if there was an update on if the town is going to address that at all.
Yeah, I don't have one for you, Sarah. And there might be work going on. I don't want to misrepresent that, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's been on the radar certainly for years, as you mentioned. But I think Claire would probably have to give a better update on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Now we can go in the order of people with their hands up. So Brindley.
Hi, thanks. First of all, I love everything that you've done. I was one of those parents who used to get lost on the trail with their kids, even though I raised hiking. It was still, when you have little kids, it's way harder to pay attention. So I'm grateful for all of that. Definitely makes a difference. My interest and question revolves around the invasive species and what you're doing with that. I'm so appreciative of that. I love hearing that you did the Eagle Scout project. That's fantastic. And I'm curious, two things. One is the training, virtual training that you did, was that recorded? And is it available for the rest of us who'd like to see it? And then the second one is kind of twofold. For those of us that do walk, that want to pull invasives when we're walking, I've done lead walks before, and I've always heard that you need to check in about doing that. And so I'd love to know what the standard and thoughts are on those of us who walk and aren't trail stewards and aren't often able to participate in the Saturday events that you guys do because we work weekends, that type of thing. For those of us who want to be able to pull when we're walking, and then is there a way to work, set up some kind of a program with that with high schoolers to earn hours, meaning we could do during the summer, do a couple of, individuals doing a couple of sessions where they, take some high school kids with them and pull some invasives.
Yeah, no, great questions. The virtual part of the class was definitely recorded. Although I'll check with Claire. So I can get back to Doug with a link to that if that's the easiest for this group. It was definitely recorded. I just need to make sure it's posted in a place that's accessible for everybody. So, and if it's not, we can get it to a place that's accessible to everything. And Claire even, and this will be a little bit more homemade, took some videos of our in-person training as well, if that's of interest to people as well. So I'm happy to post that. Yeah, no, for sure. I'm happy to do that. And as far as the invasives go, the stance right now is, I think there's a general hesitation to just encourage people to go out and start cutting invasives unless we have a comfort in their knowledge to do so. Do you know what I mean? And so that's sort of the general stance right now. What we're talking about doing is having, and similar to what you were mentioning, some sort of invasive training for stewards or other people that would be interested in doing so. And like I said, the beauty is we've got people on this committee that are doctors in botany. You know what I mean? So we've got the know-how to train people to do so. And so I think that is where we're heading with this invasive program. So, and that might even be a good 2023 goal for us, is to sort of get a group of,
Sure.
Maybe they're not even stewards, but invasive, we'll have to give them a good name. But people looking out for invasives. I know there's a couple people on the stewards that are very passionate about this. Elena on our committee is always organizing the bittersweet removal down by the memorial school, and so doing a lot of that stuff. But again, my only hesitation is just making sure that people aren't cutting things that they shouldn't be cutting. You know what I mean? And so that's why we just want to make sure that we're doing it in a logical manner, and there's some oversight to it. So that's kind of the plan at this point, Brinley.
I completely understand that. I like the idea. I'm unable to commit the time to be a steward. But when I do walk the trails, I always want to be able to pull the bittersweet or the knotweed, or, I pick up trash when I'm walking just because that's what you should do, I think.
Yep.
And so I would love to see some type of, and I think this is probably a low priority, but I would love to see some type of non-steward certification or something that you could do, where those of us who do walk regularly could do some little couple-hour class and say, okay, we have permission to pull these few things when we're walking, type of thing.
Yeah, no, I love the idea, Brinley. I'll bring that up at our next meeting, and this is good timing for it. We're going to start talking about our 2023 goals in our next meeting, so this will be great timing.
I would expect that another lower skilled thing that everybody could do is pick up trash too. But Bill, I think you were next.
Yeah, hi. I have a fair amount of experience with invasives at Pegan Cove, as many of you know. My nickname is the Slayer for some of the groups that come in. And I wanted to talk a little bit about both meadows. The meadow at Pegan Cove, the first meadow, is maybe an acre. And I don't want to take too much credit for this, but I want to say single-handedly kind of kept the invasives at bay to an extent. And as an example, there's that small triangle at the beginning of the meadow at Pegan Cove that was just a mess. It was 4 feet high bittersweet. We had a team come in there and clear it out. And I'm walking there a week and a half, 2 weeks later, and it's a foot tall, solid green bittersweet. And after two hour sessions with a weed whacker, I got it down. And another week it was 6 inches tall, and I cut it again. I cut it 10 times that year. It is now grass, no seeding, no expense, no consultants. It's just nice now. So it can be done. It just takes a lot of effort. But I'm not plugged into your invasive group. I'd love to meet with Lisa and have her walk the meadow with me, because I take bittersweet out of there. I take knotweed out of there. I take at least 2 or 3 other invasives. I don't know what they are, but they're messing up my meadow. They're not letting the grass grow. So it would be really helpful to have some professional advice. Say, don't touch that, or go ahead, keep whacking, So if you could put me in touch with Claire and just react to that. How big is the meadow in the forest, Doug?
Oh man, I don't know measurements, to be honest with you. It's way bigger than the meadow at Pegan Cove, I can tell you that. But not any less important. But I can certainly coordinate that, Bill. And I think it's a good idea, because really what we're trying to do in a lot of places, and some of it, takes money, is not only remove the invasives, but then plant native plants there, so that you crowd out the invasives with the native plants. And so that would be the ideal scenario. And so I'd love to coordinate some time with you and Lisa and Claire and sort of get out there. Claire is very knowledgeable on this as well. So another great resource from the town.
Great.
So I can coordinate that for the spring, Bill.
All right. I have other questions, but I'll let you go. I'll let others go and then come back.
Yeah, I think Peter is next, although Bill, I wanted to ask actually one clarifying question. When you say you've knocked it back 10 times and now there's grass, are you suggesting that once you do it enough times, it doesn't grow back as quickly? Or
what I've found is if you keep the things that you don't want, the invasives, that grass will grow. Yes, there's mostly grass in that area now. And it was solid bittersweet, 3 years ago, Pat? I don't know when we had that group in there. And it's what it is you just got to get it. Getting the one-time thing is great, but if you don't go back a week later, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
So You
Yeah.
just have to keep at it. And that's what I've been able to do, thank goodness.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Peter, I think you were next, and then I know Ricky has also had her hand up. So after Peter, we'll have her jump in before Pat. So
thank you, Doug. First of all, what a wonderful conversation. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? It's just a delight to hear about the level of engagement that everybody in the group is involved in and the work that Doug has done. But having heard about a real grassroots overview of invasives, I just want to turn away from that topic for a minute, Doug, and ask you a question, and perhaps other members of the group if they have some knowledge. But I read recently in the papers that Charlie Szyszewski, the mayor of Framingham, apparently signed over something that made X number of dollars available for the purchase and development of something called the Bruce Freeman Trail. Are people aware of that, or am I the only person that caught that one?
Seen that one.
So my question to you is, number one, there are 2 or 3 parts to it. Does that have some impact on the rail trail, number one, and perhaps other trails in the town? Number two, what does it do? What is the actual meaning of the Bruce Freeman Trail for those of us that don't know? And number three, is there a larger vision for the trails that goes beyond maintaining them and perhaps sees them as a more significant public resource than they're currently viewed as? Does that make sense, Doug?
It does. I'll tell you right off the bat, though. I have heard of the Bruce Freeman Trail, but I'm probably not the best to tell you. I thought that was an extension of, could be an extension of the current rail trail, but I'm not. Does anyone know?
I think it's another existing rail trail.
Right, but they just, so there is a, as I understand it, there's a Bruce Freeman Trail already, and this is to make more of it and connect in with other trails. Martin, you would probably know better than I.
I believe that's true, but neither Doug Drenik nor myself are experts on that, but we have people that are. So Josh Ostroff and Joelle Barrera, as part of the Jesuit Rail Trail Advisory Committee, and also Fond, keep track of the regional trails very closely. In fact, there was just a Metro West Regional Collaborative has a trails group that just met this past Monday, and they're also very closely looking at the regional interconnections. So
right,
there are groups that are definitely trying to get all these large regional trails connected. But it's
I'll look into that, Martin, and thank you for that. I just close on this note. As I've shared with Brian in the past, and perhaps others of you, including Pat, I think the trails, which all of you are so engaged with and care for so much, represent a potential resource, not just for Metro West, but for Eastern Massachusetts, in ways that we can only imagine at this point, that have to do with things like public health, population resilience, life extension, particularly for seniors, athletics and sports, and all sorts of very exciting ways, particularly when I see things like Cochituate State Park, which is largely forgotten in Natick, except to the extent I pound on poor Martin's head continually about it. And so I'm just thrilled to see all of this, and a thumbs up to everyone for a bright future for Natick's trails and for the trails it connects to, and brings other communities together through active recreation. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Let's have Ricky jump in. Ricky, you're on mute at the moment. You just need to come off of that. There we
Am I
go.
unmuted now?
Yeah,
It did it.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm interested. I was trying to think of gifts this holiday season, and I ran across in getting rid of papers in my move with some certificates that were given to me as gifts years ago by my aunt in England. She gave me a gift of trees that were planted in my honor in Israel. And it's a tradition, and it's the way in which much of the forest reforestation of Israel has been accomplished through gifts, one by one, planting a tree in so-and-so's honor, planting a group of 5 trees, planting a forest in honor of a big occasion or something like that. And I know that there are areas, I don't know where they are, but I've been told anyhow that there are areas of Natick that need replanting, where there's been either erosion or for some reason or another, the trees there have died and they need to be replanted. And I was wondering if there is any such program in Natick. And if there isn't, can we start it?
Great idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. It's funny you bring that up. I've talked to Leo Ryan, who's the chair of the sustainability committee, about something very similar. And so he has a heat zone map, and it shows you, sort of where is not enough tree cover, and that those areas that could use trees. Now, this is getting a little outside of my committee's purview, just because usually those are like sidewalks, and public areas, not trails necessarily. But I told Leo in my last conversation, I'm happy to organize teams of people if they want to go out and plant those trees, but it's a coordination with the tree warden, with the sustainability committee, and certainly anybody else that's like-minded. But like I said, usually the areas that need those trees are not necessarily on a trail. Most of the trails.
To my mind, they don't have to be on a trail. I just think anywhere in Natick that needs trees, either for shade or to halt erosion or to whatever trees provide. I think that is something that we could initiate, that we could promote. That would be a wonderful gift. I don't know in terms of pricing what it costs to plant a tree, but I really think that that's something. I was listening, I don't know if it was a NOVA program where they talked about if there were a worldwide effort to plant trees, 1 trillion trees would solve our our carbon problem. That trees absorb the excess carbon in the atmosphere that is causing one of the principal causes of global warming, and that to halt. I mean, we all know that in cutting down the rainforests, we're doing real damage to the global system. But I think the opposite is also true. If we plant trees and we encourage it, maybe we can, in some small way, reduce the deficit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
totally.
Good idea. Yeah. Pat.
Yes, Doug, I was impressed with your presentation. Plus, I heard about some of it already, of course. And I was thinking that one of the big challenges is establishing priorities, what things to do first. And of course, now there is some the resources or some resources with CPA. And I was wondering if your committee with Claire and everybody are going to kind of try to, set up priorities to use some of those funds on whatever.
We're salivating, Pat. We're salivating for that money. No, in all seriousness, there has been a lot of conversation around that. And actually, David Little, who sits on our committee, is also on Font. And he came to us and said, listen, we have some larger donors that are looking to make a contribution, but they'd like to know where their money would go, which is a reasonable ask. And so we did this with the Open Space Committee, and then we did it on my committee, and came up with sort of a laundry list of things that we would love to see done. And so to give back to Font, and actually that list then could actually be used as almost a starting point for the prioritization of any funds that we would receive through the CPA. And so things like the bridge from South Pickerel Pond to North Pickerel Pond, that's been on our radar for years, and I think would be an amazing addition to the trail system and connect that. We've been going after grants, or Claire's been going after grants to get some funding for that. But the CPA opens up the possibilities, certainly. The other two projects that I'm excited about pursuing are, and I know Elaine's come to the open space meeting in the past and talked about accessible trails.
Right.
But there is some talk of an accessible trail at Town Forest and potentially one at Pegan Cove. So that Town Forest, that's a fairly flat entry point all the way back, and to have some sort of overlook around in the area where the beaver has made a home right now.
Yeah.
And have some sort of accessibility for people to get onto these trails and go out to a nice overlook in Town Forest. I think that would be, those types of things to me are a big priority for, and obviously the CPA committee that hasn't been formed yet will have a big say in where those funds are allocated. But we have a laundry list, I guess is what I'm saying, Pat, of things that we'd like to pursue if we had an influx of money.
I was just going to mention one other thing, and following up what Brinley was saying. Over the years, we've had people, well, Bill's been one of the champions, but if you don't have the time to go in there and cut things back or pick up all the trash or whatever is in there, the party spots, if you have people who are willing to just take photos and send them to you, to report back, hey, here's a area, and then there could be kind of like a little, we've tried the best we can, but like a little SWAT team that goes in there and gets it cleaned up pretty quickly, so it doesn't have that horrible look to it. A big huge beer party might have here and there. So they could get people that you could, and then maybe we could get some high school students who want to do their I know we've had this in the past, the so far, the Eagle Scout groups and teams, but there's a
community service.
The Honor Society kids usually have to do a project and organize something, to help the town. And that's another resource we've used here and there. Those people are pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd love to get the high schoolers more engaged. Luckily, if you don't know, we've got, I know you know, Pat, but we've got a high schooler on our committee, so
Nate, yeah.
Pete Lord is sort of our entry point into Natick high school life. He's done a very nice job in recruiting some kids. Having a son who's in high school, I try to get him out there and certainly get those community hours signed off on as well. But I agree, it's a nice untapped resource. The other thing I'll mention is, you mentioned Eagle Scout projects. We had 5 Eagle Scout projects this past summer. Yeah. So that's the most since I've been on the committee, or since our committee's been formed. And they've done amazing work. So we've got, and I know, Pat, you're referring a lot of them to me. we have troops from Wellesley. We've got troops from Natick. There's multiple troops in Natick. We've got a troop in Wellesley. We're leveraging them. I already have requests for spring projects. So it's a great resource for us to organize something that's bigger than maybe we could handle on our own.
That's great to know about those other volunteers. Rick, you've been patient. Get your hand up. You got to come off mute, Rick.
All right. Sorry, Doug, this is terrific. Now I have a much better understanding. I'm one of those people that started walking the trails everywhere during the pandemic when I suddenly had all this time, and I've become a nut on it. So one of the things I thought about doing after doing this for a full year of pandemic was writing up for friends my own sort of trail friendly in different seasons, which ones are best when and why. And that was before I even knew there was a trail committee or, I didn't know anything about it. So I was a real rookie in terms of care and hope to help with trash. I'll raise my hand on that. The general question is there anything like a guide to Natick trails that I don't know about still? And if not, I'm thinking of things like which trails are kid friendly and for what ages and what times a year. Some of them are muddy sometimes, all of that stuff. I mean, it could also identify trails that are bike friendly. There are a few, but you don't really want them on places that, are too narrow and all that stuff. So those things, dog friendly. I mean, again, on narrow trails, dogs are a little bit of a, you gotta really harness them close if your kid's around and, all that stuff. So I just wondered if there was a general source of information, I guess.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, other than maybe informal posts on social media or something like that. But I am not aware of anything. And to be honest, if you do something like that, Rick, please send it over to me because I would love to. I think that would be a great addition going forward. We get asked a lot on Trails Days and those promotional events where to go, like you said. Where can I ride my mountain bike? Where's the best place to take my kids? Whatever the case may be, I think expanding people's knowledge of the trails. A lot of times what happens is people get, their local trail that's the one they go on and they don't go on any others. And we get asked a lot, where's your favorite trail? And the answer is really, it kind of depends on the season and what I'm doing and
what you want to do.
Yeah,
what you want to do.
And there's a lot of trails that don't get a lot of attention. I was out at Pickerel Pond the other day and I didn't see one person, and it's a beautiful area and a lot of people struggle to get back there. So we're trying to make it so like that it's a little bit more noticeable how to get into Pickerel Pond and to promote that a little bit better. But it's an amazing spot for me. But I would love to be able to promote things like that and people's opinions, and who knows, maybe start a conversation with people and get more information that maybe I didn't even know about these local trails.
Well, obviously it's some of it's subjective. It would be a collaborative work, and it would be one that would change based on how well the trails kept up, what happens around it and so on. But I'd be happy to work with when I was doing it, I was doing kind of a regional look because I was trying to find a different trail every day, which took me to about a dozen towns. And lately I've focused more on the nearby and gotten to know more Natick trails. I still don't know them all, okay, so one specific question then is just near me. I don't think it's even a trail. I'm not sure. I don't think it's part of the Sudbury Aqueduct, but they're just off of Everett Street. You can walk down to Route 27 along an aqueduct. And then if you cross 27, which is of course, not a lot of fun, sometimes a day, you can then take it further. And in the winter, when the golf course is closed, you can cross the golf course. And, people do that, I think, on skis, because I've done that in the winter and I see ski tracks and stuff. I just wondered if that was a trail. It doesn't particularly need any upkeep that I can see. But
yeah, so Martin's probably better to answer this.
Yeah, in fact, at the Metro West Collaborative Trails event last Monday, Natick was grouped with Sherburne, which I think was very appropriate because we have a common interest in that aqueduct. And in fact, we worked with them last year because that Sudbury Aqueduct segment is blocked by the golf course, which is owned by Natick. So we became the culprits in this problem that they're having. And we worked out, we got the collaboratives trail person, David Lotzenheiser, out there as well. And we found a bypass that we could go around the golf course so that we could, winter is fine, you can go across the golf course, but for year round, we had to do a bypass, but we found a kind of a nice route. And so that's been pegged as what we're looking for. So I think that's in its works. Sudbury actually just got their permit to use the aqueduct. Natick got its quite a while ago, but Sudbury just got what they call, I think, the 8M or some sort of bureaucratic numbering system for the permit they get from the Mass Water Authority. But Natick is also still working on our share of the Sudbury Aqueduct that goes from Cottage to Rockland. I got the right streets?
Yeah.
That's been blocked by the Hopewell Farm development. So we're still trying to deal with that and grapple with that. But in the meantime, I shouldn't keep the floor for too long, but in the meantime, the Greystone development, which is nearing, I think its fulfillment, at least the first phase, is providing a trail from Cottage to Rockland that would be a sort of an alternative to the aqueduct for that segment. So that could be kind of exciting when that opens up.
Yeah, I already do that, but I just walk the road because you have the power lines that are behind Greystone. I don't know where it would be.
That's the trail will go under the power lines for a bit. But that is intended as a public trail. It's just obviously not marked yet because they haven't finished it.
Yeah. The power lines also come past South Natick Hills where I live, and they've done a lot of work lately. I don't know who's done it, and I assumed it was utilities have sort of scraped out some of that, but there's a lot of it's pretty rough, and that does intersect with the Sudbury Trail, Sudbury Aqueduct there. Okay, well, I think you've answered the question. I'd love to know where the workaround is that'll go around the golf course. Is it, you have the farm above it, and is it to the right of that, or?
It goes off to the south, to the south of the golf course. Although, actually, I maybe shouldn't even be talking about that because there's one segment of that workaround that is in front of the planning board right now in Sherburne as a development in progress where they're hoping to get the easement, but they don't have it yet. So this is a work in progress.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you, Doug. This was wonderful.
Cindy, you've been very patient.
Yeah, just so Rick, there's some stuff in the chat that you might want to make sure you look at. Doug,
right.
And also Rick, I put something there for you. I as a steward at Takawambe Trail, I've done some of my own removal because I feel qualified to pull out garlic mustard, but I know that you can't just bring it to the brush dump because whatever. So I guess as you're discussing that, I'd love for there to be a way that the stuff that people are removing can be properly disposed of so that it doesn't then stimulate
proliferate somewhere else.
Yeah. And I don't really feel like I should have to be paying for it to be disposed of in my own trash. If I'm spending 3 hours or a whole day pulling stuff out, it's a lot. It can be a lot.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, the amount Bill's pulled out of Pegan Cove is Mount Everest of knotweed. So I think that's that needs to be part of the discussion with the invasive species that we were talking about earlier. And it's one thing to get rid of it or to lop it down, but then what do you do with it? Because that is the age-old problem, and it's just so bulky in some cases that it's, I think putting it in a black plastic bag might be okay for a little teeny patch, but you're going to have a lot of plastic bags if you're taking out the amount of material that some stewards are pulling out of there, for sure. So I don't have an answer for you, but I'll need to work with Claire on some coordination with the town, I think, would probably be the best scenario there. And maybe we can leave it in a certain spot that's designated for such and keep it out of harm's way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. So I actually had my own hand up to go back to the question that goes to my own notification of this session. You did mention a few minutes ago, Friends of Natick Trails. Could you just describe, at least for my benefit, how your group interacts with that group, or kind of what they're about versus what your committee is about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. And luckily, there's overlap between a lot of our town groups. And like I said, I'm on the open space committee as well. That's where I started. And then now I'm on the trails committee. So the overlap there, I think, is helpful to have someone in both those groups. At the same token, we have David Little is his name. He's on our committee, the trails committee, and then also on fonts. And so that provides some sort of overlap there and making sure that we're sort of working in coordination with them. The biggest distinction between them is the fact that they are a nonprofit and we are a town entity. So we sit under the Conservation Commission. So they appoint our committee members, and then Friends of Natick Trails is a nonprofit that someone can donate to. And so I think that's the big distinction. We can't receive funds. And so it's important for us, obviously, to work on the coordination. I think Friends of Natick Trails started off with the focus on the CRT. And now that the CRT is up and running, that they're broadening that focus a little bit. And so I think that's encouraging to us, especially as we talked a little bit about the CPA funds potential down the road, to making sure that we're coordinating with Friends of Natick Trails, who might have money from donations, and where we might want to have those donations go to. And at the same token, the CPA committee that's yet to be formed, and the open space committee. So it's a lot of coordination with the groups, but I feel good that the members of those groups, a lot of them overlap. And so I think there's a robust conversation at each of the meetings about the other groups and making sure that we're all working hand in hand. Same thing with Pat and Keep Natick Beautiful. You know, we work closely with Pat and certainly help out with volunteer needs and vice versa. So I think that needs to stay that way, because without the coordination, we're going to get, no one will know what the other hand is doing. And that's obviously not a good situation to be in, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. I think it somewhat circles back to Peter's point about rail trails and the Bruce Freeman rail network, and that there are trails and there are trails, you know, of different levels of access. The idea of having an accessible portion of some of the trails in town is super important as well. Did you want to?
Yeah, I had a couple things sort of harking back a little ways in the conversation. One, I'm really glad to hear that you've got scout troops on board for Eagle projects. Having had a son become an Eagle and watching him have to go through some iterations to find a suitable project was a frustrating point. So knowing that there are projects kind of out there that they not that they have to do them, but that they can say, oh, here's something that needs doing, is certainly helpful. But the other thing I wanted to say was, in terms of the public becoming aware of the trails, one thing that I did when I was on the previous incarnation of the Trails Committee, it's actually something Jillian asked me to do, was to lead some guided hikes on the trails around town. I think I did 4 of them. Jillian arranged to get them notified in the Sentinel, the community center's publication. And I did them, you know, on weekend. I think I did maybe some on a Saturday and some on a Sunday or something. And, you know, just took people up and down the trail and did some, you know, brief overview of the history and the geology and the plants and, you know, different things depending on what trail it was. And each time we got, you know, 10, 12 people, something like that. And they were mostly different people. So, you know, we got 40 or 50 people out on the trails through that process. I would be very happy to do that again if that's something that your committee would be interested in doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've talked about that actually, because and the open space used to host some as well. So Martin and I would lead a couple of those. Our committee did one, I think, in court, sort of similar to what you did for Earth Day. I think you were at Town Forest. I think Lisa and Martin went out to. Were you at Pickerel Pond, Martin? Is that right?
We did a nature walk, particularly targeting Lisa's knowledge of wildlife and plants.
Right. But we've talked about sort of, and this is another sort of going back to the coordination amongst groups, like who really should be, because I think there's a general agreement that that premise is a good one, you know, to get people out on the trails. But again, like, should it be open space? Should it be the Trails Committee? Should it be Friends of Natick Trails? I think, and Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, we sort of landed with Friends of Natick Trails would sort of be that sort of owner of that. Is that
yeah, we've gone back and we had discussions at all of the various groups, and they agreed to do it, but then I haven't seen anything from them, so we probably got to give them a little nudge and ask what's going on. I mean, I'd be happy to do it. It's easy to lead the walk. The publicity is maybe the hardest part, but I'd be willing if we were the designated group. I think we could do it, but I think Font is the sort of the obvious choice because of their public.
Who heads that group these days, Font? Is that still Gary Pease or someone else?
Gary again. Yeah,
I think it's get back to Gary, right?
Yeah. Okay. Pat and then Ricky has her hand up. Pat, you got to come off mute.
Doug, a quick question. I saw advertised Rich Ames has maps that he's trying to give away. Do they are they more or less up to date with the trails things that you guys, maybe not all the colored blazes and stuff, but
his most recent iteration, and it was with Martin, myself, and Lisa for sort of approval. So I don't know if Claire's actually gotten the approval yet, but I mean, it's this close, Pat, to being final and publicized here. But I Martin, am I wrong on that?
The ones that he the townwide maps that he is offering at the DPW are the official town map. The trails are kind of in dotted lines and they're all the same color, so they're not so easy to read.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, the one that we had him do for Natick Days is much nicer because the trails are colored properly. It makes it a lot easier to navigate and to so forth. But the one the townwide has the trails. It's the correct trails layer. It's just not so easy to find your way around because they're not colored properly.
Right.
But yeah, what Doug was talking about, what he's doing right now is he's redoing the regional maps. I'll call them 8 different maps that focused on a different part of town. Obviously, Town Forest had its own map. Eisenmenger Trail had its own map. Some of the smaller areas, there were 2 or 3 different trail systems on a map. There were 8 altogether, and those were many years out of date. And so he's redone those with the latest trails layer, and that's the one that's almost finalized and ready. But that one's going to be online. You're not going to have to
right. That's not going to be it.
Well, that's an 8.5 by 11 map. It's something you can print out at home. The townwide map, you got to really, in order to really read it, you have to make it really big. So we've had different.
It has that map that he's. I've seen it on Facebook. It's got the street names and everything.
Yeah, that's right. And it does have dotted lines for the trails, and I believe that layer is totally correct. But because they're not colored, you don't know which ones are the main trails and which ones are the subsidiary trails and which ones are the ones we don't want people to go on because they don't go anywhere. There's kind of just everything mushed together. So you can pick that up. That's certainly better than nothing.
Do we know whether there's
a quick shout out though? Last thing I'll say. I did get information about, what Font is trying to do with the New Year's Eve fire pits, and they're trying to do that for a second year. I think that's very creative, and it's kind of neat that, they're trying to get people out there to, have fun and experience the trails.
Yeah. I just had a quick question on the trail maps. Are those GPS enabled? If you have the PDF on your phone, is it the kind that will show you where you are on the trail?
No, not the ones we're talking about with Rich. Now there is an app that that will do that supposedly, but I'll be honest, I think Martin struggled with it too. We've been sort of piloting this, and there are times when it does not work, and then so I'm reluctant to share that broadly because you don't want to make it worse. Yeah, right, exactly. But it's
it does work as far as zooming in. You can definitely zoom in on particular trails and get nice view, but the location indicator doesn't seem to work on my iPhone the last time I tried it, so I don't know.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Ricky, you've been patient again. You had your
no. In my old neighborhood is the entrance to the Eisenmenger Trail, which I never knew was there for many. I lived there 60 plus years. I never knew there was a trail there until about maybe 2 years ago. And if I could suggest widening the entrance to the trail somewhat and helping to widen that trail a little bit so that people over 30 can walk safely on it. I think that would be a real plus. And there are, I guess, social media groups that specifically deal with Wethersfield. And if some program of a guidance of that trail could be put on that platform to let people know, people who live right there, what they can do by just walking into that trail and ending up at Pickerel Pond, which, as you say, is a beautiful area. That would be a real plus to the neighborhood. Plus the fact that we have 2 schools that that border on the area covered by that trail, the Wilson Junior High and Bennett Hemingway. And I would think that through the schools, through the PTAs, there would be good avenues for publicizing the existence of the trails and integrating their use with some of the programming that goes on in the schools. And also eventually, as the kids grow into it, being a sort of home ground labor force for keeping it beautiful and identifying with that area as this is their turf. This is something that they should care about. And, I like I say, with those 2 schools right there that bound onto the Sunkaway and that bound, it would seem to be a natural way of growing into those trails and caring about them.
No, those are great ideas, Ricky. I like it. And one of the other things on our priorities for 2022 is coordination with schools that are around the trails. Like you said, like Memorial School is right there at the end of the Eisenmenger Trail. We've already reached out to that principal, and then also over at Lilja as well, and trying to engage the people at Lilja. The Morse's Pond is right there. They've got Town Forest right down the street. So I agree with you. I think we need to figure out a way to get kids out and, like you said, make them feel like this is their place. It's strange because there does seem to be a reluctancy in some cases, and maybe less so today, but like of getting the kids out in the woods. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, a shame, and hopefully something that we can make inroads on.
I would love to speak to that 1 second if I could. This is Brinley.
Sure, you'll jump ahead of Bill, but go right ahead. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't normally, but just because it was that specific moment right there, I thought I would jump in for 1 second. I do think that an in to helping get kids out more are the PTOs. And I do think that one of the biggest reasons that I've gotten, since I still have kids in school and hang with so many parents of younger kids, is the fear of ticks. And that figuring out how to address the fear of ticks changes everything. A lot of parents are extremely concerned about their kids going out during the day at school because they're not going to have tick spray put on before they go. And there just is an enormous amount of concern about that. And it seems to have reached a very extreme level of fear instead of an extreme level of, this is how you take care of that. This is what you put on. This is what you do. You tuck your socks in, to help understand people help understand parents that it's not fearful to walk in the woods with their children. That seems to be where I get the majority of the pushback about it. And then I do think that working with PTOs is the best way to help these kids, help the parents, because the PTOs are great at getting the word out. So that's
I love that, Brinley, and I wrote that down, the PTO coordination, because maybe we're approaching the wrong groups. You know what I mean? Maybe we should be going after the PTOs and not necessarily the principals of the schools.
Yeah, great idea. Bill.
Another thought I had, Doug, I have the app All Trails.
Yep.
And I just called it up, and they've got the Coolidge Hill via Eisenmenger and Honeywell Town Forest Loop, and none of the other trails. So I have no idea how you get trails on there, but here's an app that I don't know how many thousands of people have. I don't know how many people in Natick have, but we should be on there. All of our trails should be on that that app. So anyone who uses technology can go right to it and get access to it. So there's another thought. Maybe you could reach out and figure out how to get them the other trails on that app.
I love it. I'm writing that one down too. And I think that might just be someone recording themselves doing the hike, and as I understand it, and then it's uploaded to the system if you sort of record yourself. I think that's a great idea, Bill, because the younger generation certainly relies on that for ideas on where to go to hike, and if they're not showing up as an option, then that's not going to help.
Great, thanks.
Martin?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. I kind of thought this would come up in the conversation, but it hasn't, so I'll bring it up. But often when people talk about the town forest trails these days, people mention the beavers, but nobody's mentioned it today. Maybe that's a good thing, but we do have to talk about them. And I just wanted to tell people there's a public meeting tonight at 6 o'clock organized by the Conservation Commission to talk about the whole beaver issue. So it definitely affected the town forest trails, and the Blue Trail, which is the main trail, has been rerouted for part of the distance. It's affecting Pickerel Pond, with particularly the trail that I think Ricky was referring to, that crosses to Bradford Road in Weathersfield. That's been really caused havoc by the beaver situation. So there'll be a discussion tonight. It's a public meeting of the conservation. I think Trails and Forests is definitely involved as well. So you can find it online, but I guess I'll put the link in the chat just since I mentioned it to help people out if anybody's interested.
Yeah, that would be great if you could track down that link. Yeah. Cindy, I know you've had your hand up and down a few times, and you've put a bunch of stuff in the chat. So thank you for that. Was there anything else you wanted to mention? Or?
No, I just hope that Doug is. I mean, I can say them out loud, or Doug can just be looking. Does he have access to the chat afterwards to see?
Yeah, we generally try to. Okay. Well, actually, we don't necessarily send it out, but I could certainly make it available, or Doug, you can save off a copy of it too.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, great. Well, we are narrowing in on 10:30, and this is kind of our soft stop point. I want to thank you again, Doug, for coming. Lots of great information to share, lots of partners for you, both existing and potential. So Pat, did you have something else that you wanted to add, or you're on mute still?
Doug and his team have placed a couple of nice kiosks, explanatory ones over at Pickerel Pond about the beavers and how they work. Those are really outstanding. And there was sadly a roadkill on Route 135 just yesterday. I saw it across from the FW. Beaver didn't make it across.
That's too bad. Road. I know one of Cindy's comments in the chat in terms of the kiosks as well was that some of them have information about tick, mitigation techniques, and that would be useful to have on all of them. So great. Well, thank you again for joining. And
my point was
oh yeah,
was that the notice was kind of scary, and that there isn't any information that's obvious, like to read about what you should do. It seems more like if you don't want to get a tick, you should turn around and go home.
Yikes.
I believe that's the Department of Health that has put all those up, and
Yeah,
not
right.
any,
That's not us.
and they
So maybe there should be some coordination there.
Properly. They just nail them all over the place, and I think it's a good warning. But yeah, it doesn't really tell you what to do.
Wow.
Yeah, I think signage in general could be a nice addition going forward. Even like when you go to town forest, you know, they have a gate blocking so cars can't go down there, and it just says no parking, no hunting, no this, no that, no. And it just doesn't feel like a very welcoming place. You know what I mean? You get out of your car and just everything you can't do. I think we need to sort of turn that on its head. I think it's important, obviously, to tell people what's allowed and what's not, but maybe hey, welcome to town forest. Keep these rules in mind and have a checklist, and, trying to cut down on the number of signs and how we're wording them. And I think that would be a good addition too. Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. So I just wanted to Ricky. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I was just wondering, when you come up to the entrance to what I know is the entrance of the Eisenmenger Trail at the stub end of Bradford Road, there's no sign or anything that lets you know that that's the entrance to a trail. Now, does every trail have a kiosk at the beginning that lets you know that that's what this is?
No. Now, where there isn't, there should be a sign. It's probably 10 by 13. I can't remember, sort of maroon.
Yeah.
That has that. So,
I see.
So that should be there. Now at Bradford Road, if you're talking about going into Pickerel Pond, then I definitely put one on. It's on the telephone post because I put it there myself, unless someone's taken it down. But I mean, that's kind of the work we've been doing on making sure people understand what that is.
It's been at least a year since I've been on that trail, so you put it up after that. I haven't seen it, but that's fine. Thank you.
And I'll throw in right there at the beginning of that trail is a pile of fencing and household cabinets and stuff that's been there for years. I almost got at it a couple months ago, but it got out of my trailer range, and the trailheads seem to be a magnet for dumping, and occasionally they end up being a pile of stuff. And if we have a website or some sort of access to really be a hotline, C-Click-Fix, I guess, is our option. But every time I pull up there, it's like, God, it's still there. That pile of crap. It really is a bad start.
Right. That's not the way you want to welcome someone to the trail.
Yeah. And if I get a chance, I'll get after it. But it's a fairly sizable load, which would be a quick load with a town truck.
Just to follow up on that, does C-Click-Fix have a category for trails?
I think it's open to anything.
But no, you have to choose a specific category. So maybe that's something that you could do, Doug, is to use that existing tool if you think it would work, but to maybe talk to Claire about it.
Yeah, we would need coordination with the DPW just to make sure because that goes to DPW.
Yeah, the DPW has that.
But
that would be easy
you
enough
have to
for
choose
them
a
to do.
specific thing, like it's a street or it's a pothole or it's a signage, and if there was a specific category for trails, then that would be the way to work it, and then you could get the funnel, or Claire would get that funnel filter, whatever it is.
Yeah, right. I'm jotting all this down.
Yeah, but I mean, instead of doing like your own Instagram or your own like thing separate, to be part of that might work.
Maybe more efficient. Sounds like.
Yeah, certainly when we've used it, I've been pleased at how quickly they have responded to various things that that we've reported to the DPW. They have been very prompt.
Great. All right. Well, as usual, we could talk all morning, but among other things, oddly, we have a bird to catch that has gotten into our house. So we'll have to be signing off.
We're dealing with indoor wildlife.
I just did want to remind folks that this is the last Coffee with a Purpose of the year, and we're also taking the first Monday in the new year off. So we'll rejoin on January 9th. The schedule is wide open, so if folks have speakers that they would like to have come, please coordinate with me. We would love to get the schedule starting to get firmed up for January. So with that, happy holidays to everyone. It's been
Happy holidays.
Yeah,
Happy
great.
holidays. Take care.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.